Hello everybody, it's Wednesday and you know what that means. It's time for another episode of Weird History You Never Knew You Need to Know. Today we're going to talk about a really interesting place, and it's a place that I find fascinating. And I want to start off the video right now telling you that there is no way I'm going to be able to fit into this video all of the details and all of the information and all of the content that I want to give you about this topic. So I do think that I will be coming out with more information on this topic because it's so much bigger than just one video and it interconnects with so many other things. So just know that today we're going to just talk a little bit about this topic, and then we will be circling back in other videos so that I can give you even more information because this one is amazing. So today we're going to talk about an ancient monument. When we think about ancient monuments, or when I think about ancient monuments, I think about things like the Sphinx, the pyramids. I think about things like Stonehenge. I think about effigy mounds. I think about like those types of things, right? But I never think about those things existing in America. I always think of those things existing elsewhere where we know that ancient civilizations existed. So when I think about that stuff, I think about, Egypt or Mexico, places like that. But did you know that there is an ancient effigy mound located right here in the US? Yeah, right here in the US. In where, of all places? Ohio. Serpent Mound, located in Peebles, Ohio, is the largest serpent effigy in the world. It measures 1,348 feet long and 3 feet high. This effigy mound is steeped in so much mystery. There's not even a clear idea of where this came from. This entire thing has questions from like where it came from, how old it is, what it means. Like it's just steeped in so much mystery and controversy. And so that's why I'm saying like this is going to take a long time to work out because there's so much. What I want to start off with though is who built Serpent Mound? Who are the people that did it? Based on the research that I found, the Herbert Peabody Museum was the group or the museum that owned the land that Serpent Mound was located on or is located on. In 1900, the museum gifted the land that Serpent Mound is located on, 53 acres, to the Ohio Historical Connection, who turned it into a public park. These are the people who maintain it today, and they have a website. It is ohiohistory.org. It is called the Ohio History Connection. One of the things I found really interesting when I was doing my research for this video was that when I went to the Ohio History Connection website, there are very, very few photos. If any. I can't find really any information on Serpent Mound from Ohio History Connection. One of the interesting things though that they do talk about is the origin of Serpent Mound. And according to this group of people in Ohio, they claim that the Serpent Mound, effigy mound, was created by the Fort Ancient people. Fort Ancient people? Who are the Fort Ancient people? I don't know. And if you know, please leave it in a comment down below because I have no idea who these people are. I have researched Fort Ancient, and all that they say is that that is a term that was used to describe the different indigenous tribes that were located in the area at the time. Not referring to one specific indigenous tribe, but referring to them as a collective. This seemed kind of suspect to me, so I dug a little deeper into the term Fort Ancient. I wanted to know when Fort Ancient had been used for the first time. And based on my research, Fort Ancient was actually coined in 1906, and it wasn't used to describe a group of people, but it was used to describe the area there in Ohio where different tribes lived. It's referring to a physical location. So this story that the Fort Ancient people built Serpent Mound makes zero sense. Additionally, none of the indigenous tribes in the area at the time that they're telling us that it was built, which they're telling us it was built 1,000 years ago by these Fort Ancient people. But the indigenous tribes in the area at that time, 1,000 years ago, were not tribes that built effigies. This was not something that they did. This was not part of their culture. So it doesn't make sense that they would do something completely uncharacteristic of what their culture is and what they do. So there has been some carbon dating testing that has been done on Serpent Mound, but not enough and not as extensively as it should be. So the studies that they had done and the data that they had taken, they placed the creation of this Serpent Mound between 1000 to 1650 AD. And samples taken from the upper portion, the top of the mound, support that date. Since then, there has been additional carbon dating done, which has taken samples a little bit deeper in the mound. These samples carbon date back to as far back as possibly 500 BC. That's 1500 years before they originally thought it was made. If Serpent Mound was built in 500 BC, then who built it? Because the four ancient people who don't exist weren't there yet. So based on research that's available right now, they're now attributing it to the Adena people. And what they're saying is that this Serpent Mound, this effigy was built and then it was probably had to be upkept. It had to be, because if it's that old, it's going to require maintenance. And so what they think was that it was built and then it was rebuilt or fixed. And so the additional layer that was placed on top was newer, and that's why it didn't carbon date as old at first. So then the question becomes, if they were to go deeper into the mound and take a much deeper core sample and carbon date it, what would they find? My suspicion is that they would find that it's actually even older than 500 BC. And a lot of people think it points a lot closer to the end of the last ice age. So the simplest way to prove this is just to do the carbon dating, right? Right. Except for they won't. Who won't? The people from the Ohio History Connection. There was a really interesting episode about Serpent Mound on the Netflix show Ancient Apocalypse, and I would strongly encourage you, if you find this video interesting at all, to go check out that episode of that show, because it's going to give you a lot more detail than I'm going to give you in this episode, and it's going to provide more of the scientific hypothesis and where these ideas generally come from. So why do I think that Serpent Mound is from potentially 1200 BC? Well, that comes down to alignments and what Serpent Mound was probably used for. Serpent Mound has some very, very interesting points located on it. The head of the serpent perfectly aligns with the sunset on the day of the summer solstice, and the tail points to the sunrise on the day of the winter solstice. There's only one problem. They're off a couple degrees. Why would there be something built with such amazing accuracy but be off a degree or two? Well, I don't think that they were off a degree or two. I believe that when Serpent Mound was built, it perfectly aligned with the sunrises on the solstices. So the planet Earth is on a wobble, and a lot of us don't realize it, but we do. We tend to wobble and we go, it's within so many degrees, and every so many years, we're going to move and we're going to wobble. And so what they can do is scientists can look at where the alignment was, what year with the sky and the constellations and the sunrises and the sunsets, when would they have matched up perfectly to where those features are now in Serpent Mound. And it was about 12,000 BC. And we find this is the same thing that we run into with the pyramids. The pyramids are the same thing. They're lined up perfectly, but they're just off, just by a hair. Why are they off? Because the earth has moved since these monuments were built. So the best way to date these structures is carbon dating. And if we don't have carbon dating, or if we can't go back that far, or if we can't establish when the date is, then we need to look at things like, when did it align with certain constellations, and see if there's a possibility it could have been built then. There's a lot of people who will say that 12,000 BC, people were hunters, gatherers, cavemen, but not necessarily, because how would they have done this? They had to have had some kind of knowledge and some kind of technology. I mean, we know how heavy the stones of the pyramid are, and we know how far they had to carry those stones from a quarry. There's no way that they could have done it with the technology they had back then, right? Well, they did it. So that tells me that we definitely had advanced technology a lot longer ago than we think we did. Some other really interesting cool facts about Serpent Mound is that it is in the shape of the constellation Draco. And there was a star called Thuban that actually was contained in this constellation, and it was referenced as the North Star or the North Pole Star. So we have this massive monument in the shape of a serpent here in the US. It's in Ohio. Okay, and we know that the mouth of the serpent and the head of the serpent point towards the sunset of the summer solstice, and the tail aligns with the sunrise on the winter solstice. In addition to the Serpent Mound noting where the sun sets on the summer solstice and where the sun rises on the winter solstice, and where it orients to true north, it also notes where the sun rises on the fall and spring equinoxes, and it also shows where the sun rises on the summer solstice, in addition to where the sun sets. This isn't a landmark that's made to just honor something. This has very, very specific alignments, and those specific alignments line up to very important dates. And if you need a way to show people when those dates are and allow them to understand how the year processes and the cycles of the year and how everything kind of repeats, if you don't have a lot of technology, or if technology is wiped out, what are you going to rely on? You're going to rely on what you have, and what you have is a solar system whose stars don't move, with the exception of, our 1 to 2 degree wobble of the Earth tilt thing. But other than that, that's where we can orient everything to, and it's not changing. And so it seems to me that this was definitely something this was a tool. This was something that was used so that future generations as well could have this information to understand how the different cycles of the seasons and the planet work. And I just think it's super, super fascinating. So in an attempt to not completely overwhelm you guys, I think I'm going to end the video here with just this information. But like I said, stay tuned, because there are lots of interesting things about Serpent Mound that are going to tie into other topics that we're going to talk about as time goes on. Have you ever heard of Serpent Mound? Were you aware that something like this even existed in the US? Have you been there? If you did know it was there, and if you have been there, share with me. Tell me about it. Leave it in the comment section down below. I really want to know. It's definitely a place that I'm eventually going to get to. I think it's going to end up on the Weird Places You Never Knew You Need to Go series, but we'll see what happens. If you liked this video, if you like this kind of content, if you found this interesting, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. It helps me understand what people like and what to create more of. Also, if you have not already subscribed, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And if you want to be notified whenever I upload new content, also hit the little notification bell so that you will be notified whenever something new is posted. I'm also on social media. I'll leave all the links down below. You can find that. You can also find me on my website, which is www.cosmiccoaching.net. I want to thank you so much for hanging out with me today and learning a little bit more about Serpent Mound. And I will see you guys in the next Weird History You Never Knew You Need to Know.